go, 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 go. That's the birthday. That's the birthday.
Yo, Z-Pack! This episode is made possible by the generous sponsorship of Athena Health. Athena Health partners with hospital and ambulatory clients to drive results. They offer network-enabled medical record, revenue cycle management, patient engagement, care coordination, and population health services to build Health 3.0. Yo, get back to the work you love doing. Athena Health. Free up. X gon' give it to you, gon' give it to you, gon' give it to you. What's X gonna give to us, Tom Heineber?
I hope it's cookies.
X gonna give you some cookies? I hear you though. It's like, oh yo, X is an incredible and exquisite baker. That's why they call me X, because my baking is exquisite. And I'm gonna give you a cookie. What's up, y'all? It's your boy Z-Dog MD. We're live and direct at a Studio Z. It is Monday, October something. And we have been seeing everywhere, #MeToo. And I'm like, I have FOMO, #FOMO, fear of missing out. I have no idea what the Me Too was. I was like, Me Too then. Sounds good, #Me Too, I'm posting it. I didn't realize what it was about. What is it about, Tom Heineber?
So the #MeToo got started, for those that don't know, on Alyssa Milano's Twitter, I believe. Alyssa Milano, best known for starring in Who's the Boss with Tony Danza. Anyway.
Who is the boss?
Yeah.
That's the question.
I never found out.
There was the punchline I was waiting for the whole time.
Anyway, so, they were talking about the Harvey Weinstein allegations, and Alyssa Milano was basically saying that, I feel like I'm being sexually assaulted right now.
You just turn your mic on, Tom Heineber.
He didn't have a mic on?
No.
So we were just hearing him through like...
Me.
I love it.
Anyway, now that you can actually hear me, the whole Me Too thing got started on Alyssa Milano's Twitter when they were talking about the Harvey Weinstein allegations. She said that if every woman in the world who's been sexually harassed or sexually assaulted would say Me Too and post it on social media, then we would see the breadth and width of how big this whole thing really is. And then at some point along the line, it got added that men should be a part of it too. And I said #NahBro, and now I'm trying to get NahBro started, but nobody's paying attention to me.
#NahBro. That's real classy, bro. Real classy, bro, is another hashtag. Well, Karen Molander, Cheryl Kolesel, Megan Kraljevich, all #MeToos right now. So is Kyle Jingleheimer-Schmidt, which I'm suspecting is a nom de Kyle. And not me, #Nicole Racine. Interesting. And Me Too, Susan Hutchinson. So is this prevalent in healthcare is our question today. I think we know the answer because I'm going to tell a little story about Z2. So in healthcare, Tom, it's part of the hierarchy that you sexually harass everyone within a certain distance from you. It's one of the rules, apparently, because I saw it ubiquitously. I saw male on female sexual harassment. I saw female on male sexual harassment, mostly in OB, and also in my medical school interview. I won't say which medical school it was, although I'm sorely tempted, but I was doing the interview and it was one of my first interviews. And as you guys know, the Z is a very empathic, he can be very empathic when he has to be, right? And that's why he burned out so fast, because he feels everyone's pain. So I go into this interview and it was a young female anesthesiology assistant professor who was interviewing me. And she'd read my personal statement and apparently it had triggered some conversation. So she starts having a conversation and I'm being my usual charming self. And the next thing you know, she's basically holding my hand across the table and telling me that I must come to this school and that, I have something very special that needs to be shared, and personal space is closing, and I'm like, I'm very uncomfortable with this. And it may have just been she was trying to be emotionally close, but that's not the vibe that I got, and I started getting very uncomfortable and then thought, if I get into this school, I'm gonna feel like it wasn't a normal admission. And I was rejected. No, I wasn't. I did get in.
You know what's weird? Just hearing your story, I'm starting to realize I was sexually assaulted one time.
Here we go.
Or harassed.
Tell me the story.
Not assaulted.
Tell me the story. Or harassed.
When I used to work at Tropical Smoothie, which is a terrible establishment. Don't ever drink their beverages. I was the assistant manager, and the manager, this big obese woman named Jess, was like, imagine little 18-year-old Tom Heineberg weighs like 160 pounds, and she's like come over here, like give me a hug. And so I give her a hug, and she's like, sit down on my lap. And I do it, and then she won't let me up for like 10 minutes, and I'm like, this is creepy and uncomfortable. So I had repressed that memory until just now. So hashtag me too.
Wow. Even Tom Heineber. And you know, we're not really joking. Like, I think...
No, that's a real story.
No, that's a story. Like, he's not kidding. It's just we're making levity of a situation that for many people is very, 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 very deadly serious. It's a cause of trauma. It's a cause of PTSD. It's a cause of injury, actually. And I'm seeing some of these comments. For example, Serena Snyder says, I was in the psych ward at age 14 for a suicide attempt and was pinned in an office and assaulted by a student doctor, hashtag me too. Now that is a terrifying story. And the thing is, okay, here's the other thing. Who is going to believe a 14-year-old suicide attempt patient over a medical student? That's the question. And that's where the whole Harvey Weinstein, like, you know, he's one of the most powerful, or was one of the most powerful guys in Hollywood, and it's so often about a power asymmetry. That's why I felt so uncomfortable in that room with this assistant professor of anesthesia being so forward and weird and what seemed to me inappropriate. And I'm a pretty inappropriate guy, you guys have to understand. It's the power differential where you feel like, am I going to have to do whatever, you know, this person wants me to do because of this differential in order to you know, get out of this in one piece?
Jamie says, why does every male patient feel the need to ask for a sponge bath? And I think this is important as a comment for clarification purposes. So like, what is considered sexual harassment, and what is a guy? I don't know, man. Is it like generational? Like, if you're like a creepy old guy and you're like, do I get a sponge bath? I guess that's technically sexual harassment. Right?
Well, so this is the thing, right? Like, if you do it that way, it is. I mean, you're basically saying, hey, give me a sponge bath, honey. Like, how is that okay? Here's an interesting thing. So, and I think your question of what constitutes sexual harassment, what constitutes sexual assault in a healthcare setting, from patient to caregiver or vice versa, because we've heard the stories of people in nursing homes that get abused, et cetera. And then, of course, the patient to caregiver abuse, we talk about all the time in terms of Silent No More. We talked about it with Dr. Peter Gallegly, who, by the way, I still wholeheartedly 150% support. I don't support the behavior that he showed at the end, but he has apologized for that. I support the fact that he was protecting his staff and standing up to a patient who, if you believe the police reports and the multiple witnesses, was a piece of steaming crap in terms of the behavior. Not the patient, the behavior. Because you want to criticize the behavior, not the person. So anyways, sexual harassment, you know, look, there have been books written about this in healthcare. We've all seen it. We have seen lateral harassment that may or may not be, you know, sexual in nature, from, you know, nurses to doctors, doctors to nurses, people across disciplines, nurses upon nurses, doctors upon doctors, constantly. Any female surgery resident or surgeon will tell you of the male-dominated culture, and will probably have tons of stories. In fact, I'm sure we could even see some of those within the thing here. Wendy Pitt says, as a med student, foreign med grad resident constantly touched my back, my hand, held my hand on my IM rotation. I finally told the female attending about it, which was nerve-wracking, but she took care of it, and he didn't touch me again. So, Wendy, do you think that was just a cultural thing, or was he just a creep? And that's a valid question too, because in some cultures, like in India, there's a personal space that's tighter, but still, the rubbing of the back across male-female is weird.
Is it a false dichotomy to equivocate the two? To basically say that harassment and assault are the same? Because to me, part of the hashtag thing is like, the people that have been assaulted, that's worse to me than the people who've been harassed. Because that's when it, to me, in my mind, the definition is when it crosses into the physical. That's assault, right?
Well, you know, I mean, and this is a discussion.
But then again, like, I don't know, if you're getting stalked, that's pretty bad also.
How postmodern do you want to be, where all viewpoints are relative, where verbal assault to some is the equivalent of a physical assault and so on. But I
Well,
will
to
say,
me, I want to be postmodern at the minimal level, like where it doesn't even exist.
you want to be pre-postmodern?
Yes.
I see. I understand. Well, and again,
Pre-agrarian, really.
this is-
Just go all the way back.
There you go. There you go. This is very much in the eye of the experiencer, and I would say that it's probably a spectrum. And what I would say is, it doesn't even matter what I think. It matters what the person who's experiencing the abuse thinks. And if you're in a workplace where you're supposed to feel safe, that's absurd if you're not. Often it is men on women, sometimes it's women on men, sometimes it's women on women, and sometimes it's male on male. So it transcends gender identity and all those other things, but it is a serious problem. Historically, male-dominated power structure, so women are often the victims historically and still currently, but that's starting to shift.
Michael says the world is becoming full of wussies, and y'all are propagating this nonsense.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So Michael says this. All
Yep.
right. So are you being a wussy if you're a female surgical resident on a male-dominated rotation, and the men are constantly making comments about your breasts or what you're like in bed, or the fact that you're a woman and you can't do X, Y, and Z, or they're inappropriately, grabbing at you, or making snide, comments and jokes? Are you being a wuss if you say, no, I'm not going to freaking take this? No, I think you're standing up for the fact that you're a freaking professional, and that has no place there. Now, it's interesting because where I'll agree with you, Michael, is if we're talking about butt hurt. Now, butt hurt is not sexual assault. Butt hurt is not sexual harassment. Butt hurt is offense out of proportion to the offending agent. So where you spin offense where there isn't any. Now, again, if everything's relative, anyone can spin anything. But there are clear, I think, guidelines and lines.
I think what you're saying is, I'm going to put words in your mouth here.
Good.
What I would say is, you need somebody to sign off on it. All right? I'm just saying, like, if you come up with the idea on your own and you're like, this greatly hurt me, right?
Yeah.
That's no good. That's butt hurt. But if somebody witnessed something happen to you, or if they had witnessed something happen to you, and you know that it would have been sexual assault, sexual harassment, whatever, and it is, it's reality defined on reality's terms, right? Then I sign off on that. That's real. But if you're internalizing something and making microaggressions about you, that's where the wussy stuff comes in.
Well, so
you have to separate the two. We live in confusing times.
Again, it comes from this whole postmodern idea that all viewpoints are relative and there's no objective truth, because what is offense? It's a personal subjective thing that comes from an interior. And when you're talking about the 4 quadrants of reality, interior is a big one. So your truth is valid for you. The question is, when it leads to hurting somebody else because you're very sensitive to something that maybe isn't a societal norm to be sensitive to. So I think now it's a societal norm that you don't touch a woman or a man unless you have permission to do that. You don't make sexual comments about them unless you're close friends and this is a friendly thing that you do and it's been established. I mean, it's pretty clear you don't do that professionally. So there are certain standards of ethical behavior, I think, that we could point to that are fairly objective.
Agree, but
Yeah.
it gets confusing when the people that are very postmodern, very far on the left side of the spectrum, hear an off-color comment in the doctor's lounge or something, and then they internalize it, and then it directly affects them, and they make it all about themselves when really it was not meant to harm them in any way. It wasn't. The intent was not there.
Well, let's just be honest, Tom Heineberg. We fucking hate those people.
Yeah.
Those people suck.
I agree.
And they need to be stopped. So let's not mince words. There's real hurt and there's butt hurt. And again, distinguishing the two is sometimes tough, but I think 9 out of 10 doctors agree when they hear a case of butt hurt versus a case of real hurt. Now, let me give you an example from my own life, again, because it's all about me, Tom Heineberg, if we're talking about relativistic stuff. So when I was an attending at Stanford, it was my signature that I had to be me as much as I could. It's very hard for me to be fake someone else for too long. And me means I make a lot of really stupid jokes. A lot of them are inappropriate, meaning they have a sexual or not a sexual, but there's an edge to the joke. It's never usually aimed at someone, but I make those jokes just into the air. And if you had the level of butthurt they have today, I bet you at least one person would have been butthurt. But in my entire career, I never, ever had a complaint of butthurt, to the dean or anybody else. And believe me, that did happen. So there were plenty of attendings who did have that happen. And the question is, what's the difference? When you're making the stuff about someone else as an attack designed to belittle or hurt someone, they often will recognize that. Now, some people have been the victims of trauma and they're more sensitive to that. But generally, if it's not that way, if it's done from a place of, where I think I was coming from, and again, I'm biased because I'm me, people take it for what it is. So it really, and again, you have to show love and compassion for the person that you're joking with. Because if they get the sense that you're just there to beat them down and there's a big power differential, and it's going to end badly.
You're a normal, extroverted, socially competent male, right?
Maybe. I've never been accused of that before.
Imagine if you weren't, all right?
Yeah.
And you're like an introverted guy, you're kind of weird, you're kind of smelly, you're kind of ugly, and then you say some of the stuff that you might say.
Oh,
and it comes flying out of your mouth, and then people are really grossed out and repulsed by you. That's sort of a bad position to be in also.
Well, so let's unpack that, because I think that's interesting. So if I were a creepy introvert who didn't have emotional intelligence, and I was talking like that, then that's a sign of my failure of emotional intelligence, and probably I need to learn that way of talking is probably not going to work for me. So in other words, it's going to be interpreted by the recipient as an attack or something inappropriate. And I know plenty of people, colleagues of mine in medicine, who are good people, but they are like that. And they're misinterpreted. And the truth is, if that's consistent, the person needs to be either told or taught or have enough self-insight to realize that pattern of talking isn't going to work. And there are plenty of people who do that. They just stop talking like that because they know that if they do that, they're going to be interpreted in X, Y, and Z because they've had experience with that, being interpreted that way, getting pulled up in front of the graduate medical director or whatever it is and yelled at. So you have to know. See, people ask me when you were making these videos and you're trying to be funny and you're grabbing your testicles in Manhood in the Mirror and your Michael Jackson jokes and this and that, how did you do it and get away with it? Well, because I have this much emotional intelligence to actually understand that it's really the place it's coming from, people are going to interpret correctly because I've had experience with that. But there are people who can't pull that off, and they shouldn't probably try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jasmine says, Tom, are you a creep? No.
Yes.
But I will tell you this for all the ladies in the
He's
audience.
actually not a creep. He's really nice to women. I've
There
seen
is,
it.
there is a very confusing time in a young man's life between, like, let's say 13 to 27, where you're not really sure where the lines are, and you're just like, should I do this? I don't know. So you have to proceed with caution if you're a young gentleman, and that's what I'm advising you to do.
Your frontal lobe isn't fully formed until you're in your mid to late 20s. So your ability to control impulsive behavior and stupid comments is definitely impaired until you grow up a bit. Let's see, our culture currently teaches women to shut up and move on when others show inappropriate behaviors. This has to stop. Our culture needs to address unacceptable behaviors. Andrea Skiba. I agree, and what you will see is you'll see a little schism here between some male comments and female comments. I think there is a certain experience that many women have that is almost ubiquitous, where they have been harassed and some assaulted. And that's, I think, it's so common in healthcare, and I get so many messages about this that you overlook it at your peril as a guy, because guys experience it, but I think they respond to it differently, right? Like you just now remembered being creeped out by this woman.
Yeah.
But
no, really, it was like that memory was gone until you said your story, and I was like, wait, I do have a story like that. Because if you would have asked me 10 minutes ago, I would have been like, I've never been sexually harassed in my life, C-Dog MD. Look at me. I'm
Right.
a huge man bear dude.
Guy man bear dude.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, even my story was relatively mild. Your story is relatively mild. I mean,
Yeah, that's the big difference.
That's the difference. I mean, women experience serious.
I know we talked about postmodernism a few times on the show recently, and I don't want to drag this into a political conversation, but like, it's very confusing to live in a postmodern world because that is the dominant cultural milieu that we have to all make it through right now. And so they're telling you things like men and women are equal in physical strength and attributes and everything. That's postmodernism. And then they're also telling you, like, it just doesn't jive with reality, man. Because, like, as a man, you know that you're stronger than a woman. And in most one-on-one situations, you could harm her if you wanted to. So you have to, on your part, you have to reel it in and be, like, above board with everything and not even make any moves that tiptoe anywhere close to the line. because you're just asking for trouble in almost every scenario.
I'm gonna take this to the next level because I'm a believer in this. Men and women are different people. They are fundamentally, deeply different in the way they see the world, approach the world, in their hormonal structure, in their physical structure, and in their emotional structure. And different doesn't mean one is worse, one is better. It means they see and approach the world somewhat differently. To understand that, that means that those differences will sometimes lead to subtle disentanglements that can be sorted out through the usual, sitcoms and stand-up comedy. But sometimes it means that guys abuse this very clearly. And there's some comments here, like from Brooke. There's a huge difference between humor and unwanted advances, guys. I feel like you're splitting hairs when we have a huge issue here. No, I think the obvious unwanted advances are clear. I think what Tom and I are talking about is the subtle butthurt that we worry when guys complain, you guys are making a big deal out of this and it's nothing. Okay, well, there are some things that people make a big deal out of and they may not be that big of a deal, but there's clearly, Brooke, stuff that is just simple assault and harassment, and it needs to have a zero tolerance policy. Just as simple as that. Logan, what do you think? You're pretty conservative.
Sorry, people are asking me if I'm okay because I'm being quiet.
I sexually harassed him
all the time.
Yeah, he's been.
It's been happening this whole time.
Tom had his hand on his knee the whole time, and let's go to the Tad cam. Tad hasn't been.
Oh God! Is Tad being assaulted right now?
No. That stormtrooper is just keeping him safe.
It's consensual.
It's consensual.
Then,
yeah.
People. Amy says, I think the differences between men and women should be celebrated. I 100% agree with that statement.
I agree.
And I don't think we see it enough.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
I agree. I'm going to take it one step further. I think the difference between men and women should be celebrated. I think the differences between gay men, lesbian women, straight men, trans men, those should be celebrated. I think the differences between races and cultures should be celebrated instead of ignored, and we are all one melted pot. We're not. We have strength and diversity. Why do you think there are men and women? Because together they create a diverse world that we need to survive, and it makes it beautiful. There is a beauty and a majesty in our diversity, and that's why I think one of the inexcusable belief structures in the world. And again, because I'm not a postmodernist, I'm a postmodernist. I think some truths are real, and one of the truths is that you cannot have a homogeneous world and have it be as beautiful as a diverse world. It's a harder world when it's diverse. We have sometimes trouble working together, but we have to do it because from that diversity comes actually strength.
Jennifer says, some guys think being nice and pleasant means I want them. This is the classic nice guy trope. And guys are always like, but I'm such a nice guy. It's like, dude, because you were nice doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Right? She doesn't owe you anything.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
In fact, they like him when you treat him bad. I'm kidding.
Here we go.
That's just my personal philosophy.
This is Tom's The Game lecture.
Tom,
win the game, Z. This is what you have to do. You have to be mean and make sure they don't think that you like them too much. And so here's the thing. Like when I was in,
well, you don't want to be creepy though. You don't want to be like showing up for the first day like with your hair slicked back.
Right.
And you got some roses and you're like, hey.
Wait a minute.
Can I have some sex?
That's me
now.
That's
basically what you're saying.
That's basically me. That's why I'm just going to go get some roses and slick back my hair and say that to Mrs. Dog when I got home. So speaking of this, like being creepy, right? I think men nowadays that are aware, that are self-aware, are worried about looking creepy in situations, which I think is a good concern to have. Like, here I am. I just got done doing like 5 performances this week in a row, all around the country. And the last one we did was a bunch of. It was the National Community Pharmacy Association where we unveiled you got a PharmD, but they say you just dispense. If you haven't seen it, you better see it. Anyways, lots and lots and lots of young pharmacy students who were super enthusiastic about Health 3.0. Now, if I'm hanging out at a party the night before with these students, I'm constantly aware of trying not to be the creepy old guy who happens to be well known, who looks like he's a creeper, because that's not who I actually am. So if I'm making the kind of jokes I normally make, which are usually inappropriate, and doing all that, I'm somewhat in the back of my mind, I'm like, I hope these people don't think I'm some kind of creepy 44-year-old tool bag, which I am, but I don't want them to know that. What do you think, Tom? Comments?
Let's see. Abigail says, I think sometimes men take their experience for granted. I can't imagine what it would be like to split any room in half and know I was in the physically stronger half. I'm a really strong woman, but I'm still weaker than most men. there's a fundamental vulnerability being a woman that I think doesn't even occur to most men. That's true. It doesn't even
That's
occur.
true. It
When I
doesn't-
was first dating my wife, I used to rent like a frat house with some buddies, and I slept on the ground floor in the front of the house, so I wasn't behind a wall or anything. And I slept with my window open, no screen. So, and my head was right by my bed.
Is this
So-
basically the script for Old School? Is this what happened?
I mean, kinda.
Yeah.
But when my wife would sleep over, she would always be like, "Can you close the window? Are you kidding me? Like, what's wrong with you? Somebody could just come in here and just snatch us up." And I was like, "Nobody wants me. Like, it's okay." And then I was like, "They might want you, but not. I'm good."
Well, that is a fundamental truth, and I have a degree of understanding with that because look, I'm a 5'5" Indian male. So even though I have an occasional muscle here or there, like if Tom Heinberg wanted to kick my ass, he's 6'3", he would kill me. He would murder
It's
me.
so easy. I have like 150 pounds on Z.
And it's not
I'm
like
a twig, people.
He hasn't thought about this at all. He hasn't like fantasized about murdering me. So I actually approach like big rooms where most people are taller than me with a little trepidation. I don't like to go to those kind of parties. And so I see the world a little differently than Tom, who towers over almost everybody that he's in the room with. And anytime he meets someone taller than him, he's kind of freaked out, right? Like, weren't you telling me, like, when someone's taller than you, you're like, shut the hell up, asshole, don't be taller than me.
No, it's true.
Yeah.
Anybody who's above 6'3", I automatically hate them. Like, I used to interview the basketball players for the college team here, and they were just huge dudes, and it made me feel inferior. And like, I was like, if these guys want to kick my ass, there's nothing I can do about it. You know?
And
They're just gonna beat me down.
That's a disempowering feeling.
I did feel uncomfortable being in the room with like the basketball players because they're so much bigger.
And
than
so
me.
you could
So
argue
I kind of get it.
by the transitive property of sexual harassment. If you were a woman, how would that feel with the 50% of the population would be potentially bigger and stronger than you, depending on who you are. So it's a big deal.
So get to this though. Like, how do you address the power imbalances in a medical setting, which we already know is so much hierarchical than a normal? It's such a dominator hierarchy, right? Mm-hmm. Like, isn't
exactly
it even that much harder to bring up complaints to the powers that be? Right?
Well, that's the thing. It is, and it won't be if we all stand up and say, no, this is not acceptable. Like, when I trained, it was totally acceptable for attending physicians to date medical students. That is a power differential. Like, that's a dominator hierarchy. Like, he or she is in such a position of power over that medical student that is never going to be a symmetric relationship. And the kind of harassment and stuff that went on was ubiquitous. So nobody said anything because they were all worried about their careers, and they also worried, were they overreacting? Were they just being butthurt, right? So a lot of people worried that too. And the truth is, no, you just have to set a culture, and it requires leadership, right? So part of the thing is your leaders can't be assholes. If your leaders are Harvey Weinstein's, right, or Ben Affleck's. By the way, how much do I frickin' hate Ben Affleck? I hate him so much.
Oh, he's the worst.
He
man.
is the worst.
Also, video has surfaced to Ben Affleck grabbing some boobies when
Yep,
he
I
wasn't
heard about
allowed
this,
and
yeah.
doing some things not becoming of a young Ben Affleck.
But becoming a Ben Affleck because he's a tool bag bitch. Yes, power structure matters hugely, Tanya Saliba. It does. So, like a CNA in a hospital who's groped by the CFO, what's going to happen there? What recourse does she or he have?
Yeah.
And that's where we really need better. We just need better leadership.
Well, it's funny. I've been with you at some of these conferences where we've met some of the people in the halls of power in medicine and healthcare. Really, Z gets to talk to really powerful people some of the time. These guys are running major corporations, or they're billionaires, or they're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And when we're sitting there having these conversations, I'm just thinking in the back of my head, oh yeah, I have to do what you say. Like, you're in charge here. Like, whatever. Like, if we had an interaction that didn't go my way, I would just have to suck it up and deal with it.
Yeah.
Not that it ever happens, but that thought is present.
And it's unconscious in a lot of people. So there have been studies on this. Like when Bill Clinton walks in a room, everyone else in the room does this thing. There are these unconscious body language signs of submission to the dominant alpha person in the room. And that could be a woman as well. But power in human tribes is a real thing.
Elizabeth said, I appreciate a group of men being willing to have a discussion about this. And then a bunch of other people earlier were saying, why don't you guys have a woman on this panel? Where's the women? First of all, do you think this is a panel? Do we look like a panel?
We do.
A, we're not a panel. Second of all, I think we're just trying to work it out what you ladies go through on a daily basis. Like, we don't really know. So we're sitting here discussing it, and we're getting all your comments filtering, and it's starting to make a lot more sense to me, honestly. So.
You know what would happen if we had a woman on, and we've had tons of women guests. If we had a woman on, the three of us would kind of back down and defer, because that's how we were raised when we have an argument with a woman. And this is it's a kind of an implicit bias in itself, is you don't step up and have an honest conversation. You just listen and step back. And that's at least how I was raised. So it would actually be less authentic. Like, you're seeing us try to work this shit out on ourselves. And look, I've taken implicit bias tests. I have an implicit bias in terms of the more old school impression of women's role in society as, raising kids, as being at home, that kind of thing. That's my unconscious bias, how I was conditioned growing up in the 70s with Indian parents. Even though my mom worked, she still raised the kids and cooked. And so that's my implicit bias. If you ask me explicitly what I think, I'll say, no, women are actually equal or superior to men in many ways, especially because since we're different, they're superior at some things that they're just better at. And so that's what I'll tell you. But then if you test me implicitly, when you flash those questions quickly, I'll delay before I give the right answer. And that's because we're conditioned elephants, right? So if we can't talk about our elephants and bring them out into the light and understand them, how are we going to change them?
People, I realized this recently. People don't want to talk about their unconscious emotional bias, their elephant, because it makes them feel powerless. It's the same thing as saying you have no free will. It's basically just like, no, I'm conscious. It's like, no, man, you're not. Like, we all aren't, and we should start there at the starting blocks of what that is, and then go from there. But if we don't acknowledge it, we're never going to make any progress.
To me, that's exactly right. But I look at it this way. To me, if you're going to have compassion for yourself, if you think you are the author of your beliefs, deeply the author of them, you have pure free will, how can you not judge yourself for being an asshole? So if you have implicit bias against women and you're a guy, right? How can you not judge yourself as having consciously made those decisions? Whereas if you actually know the truth, which all the neuroscience points to, which every psychological study points to, which general philosophy points to, which is we're conditioned unconscious decision makers that then become aware in consciousness of the decision our brain's already made, we can not only study what our actual unconscious beliefs are, but we can change them, and then we can forgive ourselves for having beliefs that maybe don't fit who we want to be. It's not really deeply our fault unless we fail to recognize what those beliefs are and act to change them. Then it is our fault.
How do you change them once you recognize them?
It's hard. Sometimes it requires just repetition. So if I'm trying to learn a song to perform live,
right,
like this Biz Markie thing, I premiered it at the NCPA in front of like 1,400 pharmacists. Never done it live, just recorded it, last month. How do I do that? Well, when we're shooting the video, I have to lip sync those words about 1,000 times for all the takes. And it trains my unconscious through repetition and through active entry to internalize it. And then it's unconscious. If I go up there and I start thinking about what the lyrics are actively, consciously, they will get fucked up. Whereas if they just bubble up, they're there. Now, how did that get in there? That's training, that's education, that's conditioning, that's surrounding yourself with smart people and having conversations. It's surrounding yourself with people that maybe aren't total assholes.
Well, then I guess something like this.
Which is my big mistake, because now I'm around you all the time and it's just fucking me up.
I guess something like this hashtag Me Too is a social conditioning to try and change the preconception that this is not a big deal, it's not happening as much as you think, etc. And now you're supposed to see every woman on your Facebook page, and men too, I guess, who are all like, yeah, it happened to me,
Yeah.
Like, as a man, it happened to me, I guess, but not really.
Right.
It didn't affect me in any way.
Well, and again, because you're coming from a position of power still, 6'3" guy, you're less concerned about being raped by a woman who's making those advances. If you were a 5'2" woman and the person in the Jamba Shack or whatever the hell you were working at, the Shake Smoothie Shack, what was it?
Tropical smoothie, which is gross. Don't ever.
Tropical.
I used to put literally just straight black bananas in smoothies, people. I used to change the dates on fruit all the time at the request of management. It's disgusting there. Don't go.
You were the fruit Nazi.
Yeah.
if the power differential were different, your fear factor would go through the roof, your trauma factor would go through the roof. And yes, the Me Too hashtag is interesting for conditioning our elephants that way, but understand this, it can backfire. Because if your elephant is a very, very, very old school elephant that feels like this is all just overreaction and butthurt and women ought to be in the kitchen anyways, and that men are stronger and they're designed to dominate, and some people believe this, your elephant's going to look at those hashtags and go, here's a bunch of snowflakes bitching about the natural laws of the universe. And that's the problem. So how do you change that elephant? First, you have to have insight that that's, in a pluralistic, diverse world, not an okay belief. It's just not going to function well in society. And the second thing is sometimes it takes therapy, medication, cognitive behavioral therapy, meditation, hypnosis to change your elephant.
Courtney Zimmer says 6 foot tall women can be assaulted as well.
Oh, 100%.
Mrs. Heineberg is 6 feet tall, and she was being stalked by a security guard at the hospital. And I bought her some pepper spray. She didn't want to carry a taser, but she has pepper spray now. So,
I mean,
hopefully it helps if there ever is an incident.
Absolutely.
I feel pretty powerless in that situation with her, so I have to just do my best to protect her, and that's all I can really do.
Can you believe the dipshittery that exists in the universe, that people would do that to other people?
I wanted to kill this person when I heard this story.
Murder him,
like,
right?
I wanted to grab one of Logan's guns and just shoot this guy in the
That
face.
was
I was
your
about to
elephant,
offer
right?
to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in the old days, I would have done it.
There you have it, Z-Pack Live. Tom Heineberg threatening murder. Nothing new. It's just how we roll. Hashtag butthurt. Hashtag me too. Hashtag going to jail. Hashtag death penalty. JF Finkler. Surround yourself with people you aspire to be like. I agree. Military training forces us into their mold. It's incredibly difficult to unlearn afterwards. Changing elephants, PTSD, etc. can be overcome in time. I agree. Sometimes you don't change the elephant, but you develop enough insight to actually recognize what your elephant's doing, have a space between the unconscious decision and the conscious decision to act on it. And that sometimes is enough. Everybody has desires and impulses, but sometimes we have that space where we don't act on them. We choose not to act on them. What do you think, Tom Heineberg? Look at this, Sarah Strong. I'm 5'11" woman, was harassed by a security guard too. Seems to be a pattern.
By the way, my wife is trying to say she's 5'11" in the comments. She's 6 feet tall. I measured her, okay? And we're going to have 5 children so that we can produce a basketball team, Z. Love you, girl.
You know what's going to happen? You're going to have 5 Tyrion Lannisters. That's exactly what's going to happen, because it's going to be like one of those things where you're so happy. I'm just saying. That's how Greek tragedy works, Tom Heineberg.
Mary says, raising better baby elephants. Do you think this can start at a generational level where you start to condition children earlier and earlier environmentally? Or do you think that some of it is built in personality-wise?
Thank you, Mary. Some of it is personality. There's a good bit of our personality that's genetic, but a lot of it is conditioning and social norms. When I was growing up in the 70s, there was still quite a bit of racial stuff going on. So there's some conditioning that I had. There was a lot of the sort of sexual revolution was just really in full swing, and so there was a lot of sexist stuff. I remember some of my earliest memories are watching Brady Bunch episodes where they took the guys versus the girls and had them compete against stuff of who was better. And they always had the girls win because that was the thing at the time. And I remember my elephant was conditioned to be like, dang it, it's always a competition between guys and girls. Now, is that the best for who's better? Is that the best conditioning for an elephant? It should be we're different and we celebrate our strengths, right? Each of ours. So, I agree. I think you guys got to start early. No one has a monopoly on how to do that right. So it's kind of trial and error still because we don't know what the fuck we're doing.
Dana says, why not work on changing it? Racism is a taught behavior. Respecting others can be taught.
So Dana Munch, racism can be a conditioned taught behavior, but recognizing differences in races, I think there's a lot of evidence that children innately have this. What you do with those differences is often societal and cultural. So you can recognize that person's black, that person's white, that person's yellow, that person's a woman, that person's a guy. You see the differences. Kids will notice that. Where they're conditioned, if you ask, they've done studies on African American kids, they are even conditioned to think that if they see a black face, it's inferior, less desirable than a white face. And that's society there, right? Now, that is not a genetic conditioning for an African American child. So when people talk about, leveling play, oh, I didn't tell you the story, my God, Tom. So Jocelyn Elders, the 13th Surgeon General of the United States under Bill Clinton, was the speaker after me at Capitol Health in New Jersey when I spoke this week. And I do my thing, and it's like, the crazy, insane nuts. And she comes up and she's 83. And she's African American. And remember, she was the one who had to resign because of the controversy when she said, maybe we could prevent pregnancy and sexually transmitted illness if we taught masturbation in the schools. And my first thought at that time was, you have to teach masturbation? That just happens. But the funny thing was, so she's at this thing and she goes up and she talks about, at 83, she's as fiery and just like in your face as she was in the 90s when she was Surgeon General. And she showed a really interesting slide where it had 3 slides, 3 options. And it was a fence and there was a baseball game on the other side of the fence. And it had kids of 3 different heights, a little short kid, a medium kid, and a tall kid. And they were all trying to see over this fence to see the game. And the tall kid could see over the fence. The medium kid couldn't, and the short kid certainly couldn't. The medium kid could only see a little bit. The next slide was, well, how do you compensate for their differences in innate advantage? And then they had little boxes. So the little kid had a tall box, the medium kid had a shorter box, and the tall kid didn't have a box. Well, that's one way to equalize. So you could think of it as maybe an affirmative action type of thing.
Communism. Yeah, that slide makes me want to puke.
And
that's straight socialism.
It makes Tom and Logan want to puke.
Equity is a fantasy, like equality is a fantasy.
But
the only thing we have is equality of opportunity here in America, and that's the only thing that can ever be real.
So here's the third slide in that sequence.
Stop pissing us off, Zita.
Here's the third slide in the sequence. The third slide is the boxes are gone, the kids are still the same height, but they've knocked down the fence. So you've taken away the barrier to opportunity. That's the world we're looking for. Not a world where we have to alter reality, a world where we knock down barriers so everyone has a level playing field. That's all it is.
And that is equality of opportunity, my friends, and it's not communism.
It's not communism.
It's great. It's called capitalism.
It's America.
It's American dream.
It's America. Yeah. I don't know that it's capitalism, because capitalism always ends in slavery, according to Tom Heineber, but...
Tanya says, Tom, we do not have equality of opportunity. I agree with you.
I agree.
It's what we're striving for.
It's what we're striving for.
We definitely don't have it.
It's what we're striving for. So, I mean, I think that's a good way to wrap this ish up. What do you think, Tom? You got other stuff?
No, I'm with it.
It's a good discussion.
Let's get out of here, man.
Even if Logan was silent but deadly.
He was silent.
I don't vote.
Wait, no, you were silent more.
Silent more.
You weren't silent no more.
Yeah, he was silent more.
Yeah.
Hashtag Logan too. We need a hashtag for Logan because I have 100% Logan was sexually harassed. 100% because he's got such a nougaty center that he has to protect. Something happened, and I bet it was Tom. That's all I'm saying.
We're going to go out with a comment by Jesse, who says, you don't teach masturbation. You teach that it's okay, and it's one of the best gifts Mother Earth ever gave us. And he made a fist like this.
I wanted to tell Jocelyn Elders that thank you for teaching me to diddle myself, because it's a gift that has kept on giving. And on that note, we love you, Z-Pack. Please stay safe. If you have stories to share them in the comments. And we love you, Z-Pack. We're glad to be home here. Peace.
Go, 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 go. That's the birthday.
Hey Tom, is that a pickle in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me?
Dude, this guy
episode is made
Matthew.
possible by the generous sponsorship of Athena Health. Athena Health partners with hospital and ambulatory.
Continue your statement, Tom Heineber.
Yeah, go back and redo the Athena Health.
I am.
Dude, what's wrong
What
with
were you saying?
You were the worst at this job.
You guys keep interrupting
This is a
it.
sponsored
Play
episode.
Athena Health sponsorship logo.
I gotta play the whole thing over.
Do it.
Go, 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 go. That's the birthday. That's the birthday.
Yo, Z-Pack! This episode is made possible by the generous sponsorship of Athena Health. Athena Health partners with hospital and ambulatory clients to drive results. They offer network-enabled medical record, revenue cycle management, patient engagement, care coordination, and population health services to build Health 3.0. Yo, get back to the work you love doing. Athena Health. Free up.